The 2025 International Colloquium Series Europe is sponsored by Union Theological Seminary in the City of New York, the Episcopal Diocese of California, King's College London, Regent's Park College, University of Oxford, the Center for Black Theology at Regent's Park College, Oxford, the Protestant Theological Institute of Paris, and in partnership with the Cathedral Church of the Holy Trinity, the American Cathedral in Paris.
The Northern California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation is dedicated to promoting justice, health, education, and service. Please consider making a donation at NorcalMLKFoundation.org. Every donation makes a difference.
Voilà, chers amis, bienvenue à toutes et à tous. Heureux de vous voir si nombreux finalement pour une journée qui n'est pas évidente, puisque c'est un pont en France et que beaucoup sont hors de Paris aujourd'hui, entre le jour férié et le week-end. Donc voilà, on est très heureux que vous soyez là. On va être rejoints cet après-midi par des étudiants qui sont en cours ce matin. Donc voilà, on sera un peu plus nombreux encore sur place. Et puis on est en train, comme vous le voyez, d'enregistrer et de filmer pour la chaîne YouTube à la fois de l'IPT et puis de la South California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation. I didn't even look at my paper. Parce que vous l'avez compris, cette journée, ce colloque intitulé « Le sens de la communauté dans un âge d'incertitude, expériences religieuses afro-américaines et discours publics » est co-organisé par la Northern California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation, mais heureusement elle a un petit nom et on va l'appeler par son petit nom dorénavant, c'est la NorcalMLK. Et puis bien sûr l'IPT. Donc on est très heureux, très fiers, très reconnaissants de pouvoir accueillir aujourd'hui dans nos locaux 4 collègues, tous d'Amérique du Nord, tous travaillant dans le domaine de ce qu'on appelle aux États-Unis les Black Studies et qu'on a un mal fou à traduire en français. Faute de mieux, on a utilisé le terme afro-américain, mais vous allez voir au fil de la journée que c'est une appellation en somme problématique. Mais il faut une journée pour prendre conscience de ces problèmes de traduction. Nous avons donc 4 exposés aujourd'hui. Alors, le premier sera Aaron Grizzell, qui est le directeur exécutif de la NorcalMLK. On aura ensuite un exposé de Dwight Hopkins de l'Université de Chicago. Et puis il y aura la pause à midi et l'après-midi, on aura 2 autres exposés. Andrea White de Union Theological Seminary et puis Raymond Carr de l'Université Harvard. Vraiment, je suis, en votre nom à tous, je veux leur dire à tous les 4 ma reconnaissance qu'ils aient fait une étape par Paris et par l'IPT après une tournée qui les a conduits par l'Université d'Oxford et King's College. Ils arrivent tout juste là d'Angleterre. Voilà. Donc on fera un moment bibliographique, de présentation bibliographique en fin de journée pour chacun de nos 4 orateurs. Donc pour l'instant, je vous propose sans plus tarder, est-ce que j'ai oublié quelque chose? Dis-moi Frédéric, est-ce que j'ai oublié un point important? important.
Peut-être en 2 phrases dire en anglais ce que je viens de dire
Ah
en
oui,
français.
ah oui. Of course, yes, in English. Welcome everybody to this international colloquium entitled The Meaning of Community in an Age of Uncertainty. This event is co-organized by the Northern California Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Community Foundation and the Protestant Institute of Theology in Paris. I am exceedingly grateful, I'm delighted, and we are all honored to welcome our 4 speakers today. Aaron Grizzell, Executive Director of the NorcalMLK, Dwight Hopkins, the University of Chicago, Andrea White, Union Theological Seminary, New York, and Rand Carr, University of Harvard. We will have an opportunity to say more about our guests during the day, and specifically on bibliographical questions. We will gather all the bibliographical informations about their publications at the end of the day. For the moment, it is time to start with the first paper that will be given by our own Grizzell, and the title is The Rhythm of Nature, Howard Thurman, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Meaning of Social Justice. Aaron, thank you very much for being here, and you have the word. Yes. Vous avez, sorry, just one more word, French translations. Aaron will be speaking in English, and French translations have been handed out. Make sure you got one. Thank you.
Merci, mon ami Mark. Thank you so much, and thank you. I do apologize because I got an A in French in the United States and an F in being able to speak French in the United States, so I do apologize for that. We are very honored to be here with you in this very historic campus, and in connecting with our dear friend Mark Boss and Frederique and the staff and faculty here. And it was it all began with our dear friend Anne Marie last year in Palermo, Sicily. We were at dinner and thought about a way we can come together to think about how we can become connected much more firmly as a family of scholars who are committed to theology and the study of religion and the study of understanding each other better. And we think religion is central to the human experiment, and that it makes us better human beings and a family, makes us closer together. So I am an historian of religions. I am not a theologian. We have 3 theologians with us who came, and I am on this trip to make sure they do the right thing. But I am an historian of religions, and part of my work looks to think about religion as a human phenomenon. I am also an executive director of a foundation that represents the thought of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that means that part of my duty is to think about certain meanings. One of those meanings is the meaning of social justice. In the United States, there is no unified definition for social justice. It is assumed that there is a meaning for social justice, but there is no unified definition. There's no unified meaning for social justice. And so this paper and these remarks that I'll be offering are a thought about social justice through the lens of Dr. King and through the lens of one of his mentors, Howard Thurman. Now, the paper that has been translated for you is an expanded version, is an expanded paper of what I will be giving. So my remarks will not be full. The paper has a much more full rendering of what I'll be giving to you today. So you can use that and think about that, critique it, mark it up, you know, and think about it. So again, my title, as Mark had mentioned, is The Rhythm of Nature. Howard Thurman, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Meaning of Social Justice. When discussing how radical critical thought could use religion and the understandings of the Enlightenment and modernity as portals to exploring authentic expressions of non-Western peoples, historian of religions Charles Houston Long noted that, quotes, a structure for the universal in the human world, though created for Enlightenment understandings of the human venture, expressed an opening for the authentic expression of others. Religion thus became a locus for the meaning that carried an archaic form. It was a root meaning, and could thus become a basis for radical critical thought, close quotes. In some of our 20th and 21st century human rights and civil rights movements, religious thought has given rise to ways of thinking about society and justice that have predicated the implementation of strategies designed to achieve certain social goals and objectives. My remarks today briefly propose two philosophical ideas, sociality and justice, out of which I argue emerges the meaning of social justice. These ideas take as their progenitor two of America's most creative religious thinkers, Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr., whose lives share a common connection to the meaning of modernity, a connection from which emerges a moral and ethical force that grounds their meaning. Howard Thurman may be best known as a mentor to Martin Luther King Jr., yet in his own right, Thurman possesses a reservoir of scholarship and a corpus of thought that continues to influence succeeding generations of thinkers, ranging from civil rights activists and to religious and interreligious minds and philosophers. His childhood experiences left an indelible impression upon his views, where mixed with the maternal and matriarchal care and his own childhood connection with nature and his natural surroundings, Thurman's young mind was planted in fertile, primordial soil. Martin Luther King Jr.'s social and philosophical grounding can also be traced back to his concrete childhood experiences. In a brief autobiography, he discusses the impact of these experiences on his thinking. He states, quotes, "It is quite easy for me to think of a God of love, mainly because I grew up in a family where love was central and where lovely relationships were ever present. It is quite easy for me to think of the universe as basically friendly mainly because of my uplifting hereditary and environmental circumstances. It is quite easy for me to lean more toward optimism than pessimism about human nature, mainly because of my childhood experiences, close quotes. These experiences strengthened two of King's long instilled convictions, namely the idea of a personal God and the dignity of the human personality, both of which informed his activism and work. Now, my remarks are separated into 5 sections. The first section, Primordia. Number 2, Nature's Rhythm. 3, Sociality. 4, Justice. And last, Social Justice, which taken together will, I hope, lead toward a vibrant meaning of social justice. Primordia. Looking back, one must carefully consider how an experience of capture and enslavement and the connected Black religious experience lay the predicate for the informed existence that molded thought in the communities from which Thurman and King emerged. The Atlantic world's Middle Passage is the locus from which to view this utterly definitive and unique phenomenon through the experience of physical and psychological torture. Today, it may be hard to imagine the physical terror in the holds of the purpose-built ships fitted for Atlantic slaving, transatlantic slaving, where African captives were taken on board, stripped naked, packed together in irons and chains, and violently abused for months on end during the transatlantic voyage, the cramped conditions often leading to sickness, suffocation, fever, defecation, and death. These physical conditions fused with peculiar circumstances to prey on the mind in a unique way. The concrete reality of involuntary separation from a known and structured world in which reality was articulated and understood met the captive en route to and on board the slave ship. On ship and at sea, they were homeless, landless, nameless, separated from self and being. This terror experience was both individual and social. At the level of the individual, the confrontation with the stripping of self and meaning emerged from an involuntary experience at the deepest level of being. The individual captive was forced to confront this loss in a uniquely personal manner, and within that isolation, grasp their being again. The experience also expressed an ontological primordium of a new community and a social marker, because being shackled and submerged in the holds of the slave ship was a common experience from which emerged a common social language. I think the fundamental force behind Thurman's and King's thought lies in this fertile primordial ground, as a ground that relates to that experience from a deeply ingrained point of reference in the West's idea of modernity. In other words, the strength of Thurman and King comes from a relatedness with Western sensibility on the one hand, and peoples and societies across the world in the throes of colonial and post-colonial subjugation on the other, the powerful and the powerless, the vociferous and the voiceless, the subjugated and the subjugated. Nature's rhythm. Thurman's childhood experience left an indelible impression on his view of nature as a milieu characteristic of order rather than chaos, exuding a rhythm and imbibing its elements with creativity, harmony, and community. He begins his systematic framework by positing interaction as nature's built-in urge. Why? Because to survive and live, nature needs to interact, for nature is life, and interaction is how life realizes that it is both alive and itself. Thus, at the elemental stage, nature is a goal-seeking endeavor. It is selfish, seeking its own survival. And this determination connotes a discipline of self-sustenance. Nature, therefore, is continually searching for nourishment. And Thurman argues that this is life's concrete, goal-seeking purpose at the organic level, and an elemental part of the motive function in nature. This goal-seeking element also marks a primary teleological end. Nature seeks to live itself out. In addition to this discipline of self-sustenance, there is also a method, and the method has to do with the way in which a particular life form sustains itself. The method is a structure that charts the course by which a particular form of nature secures its survival. Thus, the method is a special kind of consciousness whose process is regularized and becomes a visible sign of an element's vitality. There is therefore a communicative lattice within nature's network that communicates the conditions by which life is to be secured and by which vitality can be viewed. But Thurman also notes that this lattice, when broken, can disjunct nature from its mode of sustenance and lead to death. Sociality. As elements of nature, human beings are imbued with the regularized structure mentioned above. Interaction is required to live. It is the built-in urge whereby human beings realize their own existence and recognize themselves in that existence. It is both a confirmative and a recognitive process in that I realize my own existence through others' recognition of me, and I recognize myself through my reciprocating interactions with others. Thus, human beings need connection to and with each other to confirm and affirm their own individual existences and to live in that existence physically, spiritually, and emotionally. A person is therefore a self-recognizing entity and the fundamental element in the structural lattice of being human. For my inner cognizance is seeded through outer recognition by others, and it is affirmed through my reciprocating interaction with others. So sociality is the interaction between self-recognizing persons. It is part of the human requirement for life and vitalization. Indeed, sociality is the life-nurturing food of human existence and human vitality, and it is elemental to human survival. Sociality is also the method, or that special consciousness, and together with a discipline driven by the insatiable determination to survive and thrive, they chart out the regularized process for modes of communication, or energy, that is made available for self-generation, interpersonal connection, and the development and growth of human community. At its base, then, communication is the predicate for any regularized process in the nurturing of the human project. And the built-in flexibility in this process enables varied modes of communication that reflect the many ways in which human relations can congeal and continue the human development journey. Regarding the flexibility of this regularized process, Thurman argues that irrespective of whether it is affirmative or derogative, communication is required to live. For the need for recognition by human beings to confirm one's own existence, even if that recognition is derisive, is vital to life. He states, quotes, "To be ignored, to be passed over, as of no account and of no meaning, is to be made into a faceless thing, not a human being. It is better to be the complete victim of an anger unrestrained than to be passed over as if one were not, close quote. Thus we see the absence, not the content of communication, is what causes atrophy, or the breaking of the lattice in nature. In the method of sociality, the requirement for interaction is also the recognition of interdependency. What interdependency shows is that there is a mutual need for interaction in the confirmative and recognitive process. It states that as I recognize my own existence through your recognition of me, you recognize your own existence through my recognition of you. And as I recognize myself through my reciprocating interactions with you, you recognize yourself through your reciprocating interactions with me. This leads us to an implication in the flexibility of this regularized process, and it has to do with the health of the human being as person and the health of the social network as self-recognizing persons in interactive and interdependent engagement. Thurman sees the human experience as part of the larger rhythm of nature, that the warp and woof of human life, its confrontations and permutations, are all a part of this rhythm, and as such possess the tools necessary for sustaining its own vitality. And within the diversity of the human project, the varied communicative structures act as strings that in the main, when played together, lend to harmony that conduces to maximal vitalizing energy for the self and for the development and growth of human community. However, these structures can also lend to disharmony that conduces to suboptimal energy through a derogating communicative structure. When we affirm each other, it makes for better and more wholesome connectivity. When we are mean to each other, when we insult each other, that drives down our connectivity. Yeah. We can still live. Slavery proved that. 400 years of oppression and we are still alive. So the human being can survive in deeply derogating environments, but do they thrive? That's the question. It is here where interdependency acts as a natural modulator, because interdependency is the admission that interaction is reciprocal and ultimately leveling, and the need for the sustenance of interaction is mutual. At some point in the human family, we will discover the balance between the way we communicate with each other to make the human being individually and socially better. That we can become better human beings, more efficient human beings, more alive human beings. That's Thurman's argument. Justice. The Western idea of justice takes many shapes depending on its connotation and use. However, Oxford's David Miller cites the opening statement in the 6th century Institutes of Justinian that quotes, "Justice is the set and constant purpose which gives to every man his due," close quotes, as the locus for our modern understanding, marking 4 elements common to the varied uses of justice that are sourced in this idea. Namely, 1, justice deals with how individual people, groups, and etc. are treated. 2, justice is obligatory on and enforceable against the offending agent. 3, justice involves impartiality and consistent application. And 4, justice involves an agent able to dispense justice. In this common shape of the term, we are at once hearkened to what late antiquity Roman order represented. First, in this idea of justice, only those who were citizens under Roman law could avail of its benefits. Slaves, who played a central role in Roman society, had no civil rights. In addition, the practical status of women, who were also citizens, carried less rights. For instance, the lack of voting power and political office holding, and often a deep dependence on men for social standing. These 2 points, just 2 examples, demonstrate how Justinian justice falls short as a template for our modern foundation of justice. The very presumption of inclusivity that the term justice now evokes through David Miller's example fails to confront and explain the transposition from its exclusive beginnings in the 6th century to one now embedded in our modern census communists. How do we get to a justice that is inclusive of all people? How does we get that from a justice that was derived just for a few, without wrestling with the problem of justice in the beginning? We have not wrestled with that, and yet by some magical act, justice is now inclusive of all. What I think is required is an idea of justice marked by a different path, one that follows a more archaic route that leads to an archaism of the person. And Thurman's structure of interdependence is a prerequisite to this meaning, which we find through Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophical grounding. King states, quotes, "Personalism's insistence that only personality, finite and infinite, is ultimately real, strengthened me in 2 convictions. It gave me metaphysical and philosophical grounding for the idea of a personal God, and it gave me a metaphysical basis for the dignity and worth of all human personality." Personalism places the person at the center of a philosophical system that originates from the intuition of the person themselves and then goes on to analyze the personal reality and the personal experience that are the objects of this intuition. The original intuition is really that of self-awareness, by which one grasps values and essential meanings through direct experience. The knowledge produced by reflecting on this experience is then an explication of this original intuition, which in turn forms a structure for moral action. This centering principle points to a transcendent constitution of the person, or an ideal form, that is irreducible to either specific or totalizing manifestations. Thus, with Thurman's method of human sociality, a structure emerges that reflects formative principles for ideal self-awareness and interaction. It's personalism's stance that the continual process of interaction produces stored memory for reflection, and the knowledge produced by reflection is an expression of these experiences. The reflection marks the point of transcendence where form, or essence, emerges through such reflection. Further, reflection at the point of interaction and self-recognition reveals a transcendental ideal of both survival and the desire for health, growth, and development. It is this reflective locus that marks the unique freedom of the person, and survival and the desire for health, growth, and development reveals a concomitant dignity that emerges through the reflective act. They mark data points in the mode of being that seeks out maximum energy. Thus, in the interactive and interdependent social network, the confirmative and affirmative process reveals the freedom and dignity in oneself as one reflects that freedom and dignity in another. And therein lies our meaning of justice. Justice means the confirmation and affirmation of freedom and dignity in one another. This definition is at once selfish and selfless. It is selfish in that justice is embedded in the human mode of sociality that is required for one's survival. And it is selfless in that that very survival requires the giving of oneself to others to grow and to thrive. Social justice. The concept of social justice can be found grounded in concrete experience and articulated in sociality and justice, two philosophical principles embedded in the fundament of modernity's meaning, but located outside of modernity's epistemological control. In Thurman's structure, sociality is defined as interaction between self-recognizing persons, the method by which human beings emerge, develop, and grow. It is a way to view human self-awareness in individual and in social formation, wherein the milieu of interaction and interdependency serve to confirm and affirm the person. And he ties the emergence of the human being to the elemental state of insatiable need in nature for survival and propagation. Selfishness as an inherent quality represents this insatiability. Human beings as elements of nature are therefore imbued with this need. Thus, the connection with and between human beings is a reciprocating, confirmative, and affirmative existential process that is required for life physically, spiritually, and emotionally. This special consciousness is a method that charts out the regularized process for communicative modes that are made available for self-generation, interpersonal communion, and the development and growth of human community. We therefore find that communication is the predicate for any regularized process in the nurturing of the human project. Justice, defined as the confirmation and affirmation of freedom and dignity in one another, is embedded in the concrete, interactive, and interdependent social network and emerges through the mutual, confirmative, and affirmative process of sociality, where reflection reveals a transcendental ideal whereby freedom and dignity mark data points in the human being's reflective urge and desire for health, growth, and development. It is a definition that is both selfish and selfless. Selfish because justice is embedded in the human mode of sociality that is required for one's survival, and selfless because this survival requires the giving of oneself to others to grow and to thrive. So through Howard Thurman's and Martin Luther King Jr.'s systematic approaches, we can grasp the truly human meaning of social justice. Social justice means mutual interdependency in confirming and affirming the freedom and dignity of one another. Social justice means mutual interdependency in confirming and affirming the freedom and dignity of one another. And any item, process, or engagement that falls short of the terms of this mutual interdependency falls short of the terms required for realizing social justice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aaron, for this very thoughtful paper and definition you propose on the basis of your reading of Thurman and King, which is very
precise, and it's a real object we can discuss now. You repeated it, but let me repeat it once more. Mutual social justice as mutual interdependence in confirming and affirming the freedom and dignity of one another. I think there's a lot here to say about this reflection on social justice. There would be probably a lot to say also about the two authors. We all know, at least by name, the icon, Martin Luther King. But perhaps we know more of the icon than of the author. And we must confess we know very little about Thurman in France, and we realize, listening to your paper, how important he was in the shaping of King's thought and also Mahatma Gandhi. And it was a tremendously important figure in 20th century social thought. So thank you very much also for bringing this name to our attention. I would have a question myself about the definition, the discussion on social justice, but I'm not sure. Well, perhaps if the audience allows me, I will start with my question, and then I will just do my normal job, what I should actually do. It seems to me that there are two different questions that are almost always mingled together in political ethics, which is, what is justice, and to whom does justice apply? And it was quite obvious in some parts of your paper when you talked about Western justice or modern sense of justice. I didn't get the impression that it was a wrong definition of justice. Even the Roman law concept of justice, the problem wasn't in the principles of justice. The problem is, how far do these principles apply? What is the moral community or the legal community to which these principles are supposed to apply? And so it seems to me important to distinguish the two. In very recent days, there has been a fascinating discussion in the United States about due procedure. We heard Joe Rogan, one of the icon of the MAGA movement, explaining his own thoughts, what due procedure means, which is an essential component of classical, you can call it Western or modern or whatever, conception of justice, but it's all about equity. Justice as equity, reciprocity. And so the question really, and he had very good argument. I think he was explaining John Rawls, the veil of ignorance. I will probably use Joe Rogan in my classes now. He had this very good argument saying, let's not talk about this president, but let's imagine another president in the future, and he doesn't know what due procedure is about. We're going to be in trouble. So, okay, I said enough. The distinction between the principle of justice as such and to whom do they apply?
Respond to that?
Oh, sure.
So, it's an interesting point. The whether or not our current understanding of justice is accurate or covers, is equitable. The problem, as I see it, is that we have not come to terms with it yet. Justice, if we take from from David Miller, his argument that justice as a definition finds its root from the 6th century Roman definition of justice. That idea of justice was rife with inequity. Slaves, different type of slavery, but just as impactful as American slavery. Slaves had no rights, so they weren't even counted in this definition of justice that Justinian wrote. Women had less rights, so justice counted less for women. And there were other areas. People who were not Roman citizens didn't even count in this justice. You get where you understand what I mean? So it was an exclusive definition. It did not come from a place of human, universal, I don't like that word, but it didn't come from a place of wholesome development in that sense. Wholesome meaning from everyone. It came from an emperor down to the people. And then it was only down to some people. And it's from that definition that we derive a somewhat universal meaning of justice. But how do we get from that exclusive definition to this universal definition? That's the concern. If we have wrestled with that definition and come to terms with it, said, okay, we've wrestled with it, we have fought through its faults and its issues, and have come to understand and decide that this is what justice means for us as human people in the human family, then we have something to fall back on and to land on when injustice occurs. We do not have that in this definition, in this line of definition. And so my argument is that justice comes from a more archaic human place. And it's derived from a different source, not from a law that is delivered from a single person down to a certain people, but it comes from a place from within. And that place from within has ways of communicating and ways of connecting us that derives from the commonality of the human experience. That's the argument.
Thank you very much.
The International Colloquium series, confronting global issues with moral clarity and intellectual depth.